Figma downloaded here. It just finally loaded.
Do you want to look at that together first then? I can stop
That's
sharing.
okay. Let's go into yours and we can maybe at the end go through
Okay.
Alexis's.
Mine is also pretty messy, but I'll just kind of walk through some of the things that I've been exploring. So I keep going back to the 3 how might we's that Mike had created, just because I feel like there's so much possibility with this Collabject view that I want to be sure that I'm staying on track and not like swiveling off too far. So his 3 were making it efficient or more efficient to understand what's changed in news since the last time we interacted with the Collabject, essentially trying to find a way to quickly capture information in a conversation and put that into the description, and then reducing the amount of context switching between objects and between pieces of an object as well. So I've been just kind of continuing to work on those. Some of this we had looked at last time, but I added on to it just a bit, playing with some ways to kind of notify the user when something has changed. But then that raised the question of what kind of notifications are meaningful to users in terms of changes. Does it matter if it's a description update or if it's it went from confidential to not confidential? Like, what level of notification needs to be surfaced and for which notification? So those are some things that I am still a little curious about, but explored maybe some sort of, this is using our alert pattern because it's already defined. Doesn't necessarily have to be that, but some way that they can quickly see that something has changed. I also explored having the ability to maybe even sort of like when you use find in the browser, having the ability to see the number of changes and then potentially click on, you know, up and down arrows to kind of navigate through it. But that gets complicated if we had a sidebar and we were trying to address it, although I'm trying to design things without a sidebar. But I'm curious about the level of complexity that could be involved with doing that sort of jump around approach, or if it's even valuable. So again, just doing some exploring.
I also, can speak in. I mean, if you want to slow down just a minute, I can give my 2 cents. I think the most important things that people care about seeing what's changed is looking at the description diff in a single place instead of scrolling through notes, and then comments and discussions. Like what
when you
what
say, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say those are the 2 things, like changes in the description, maybe the title, and then like new comments that I haven't read or I haven't seen before.
When you say changes into the description, do you mean just that there was a change and who changed it, or specifically seeing that historical difference? Seeing the historical difference. So like, and this is like more, I think, of an executive or like somebody who just wants a high level, because the description is used for tracking a lot of different things. Like everybody contributes to it sometimes. So like Anoop was a good example where he uses issues. He goes through and instead of reading comments and all that stuff, he just goes and looks at the system activity to look at each of the different diffs. So like if there's a way to easily like switch to the different diff views from within the description near it, and then also highlighting which comments are new since the last time I was there. Yeah, Notion does this. I feel like I was looking at, I think it was Notion. I was looking at a couple of examples today, and one of them lets you not only see the history, but be able to view like a little pullout that shows a portion of the history and revert back to the history if you want to, kind of within the same context, which I thought was really interesting. Yep. But that doesn't seem like it would be an MVC thing. And I don't know if that's something that's going to provide that much value from the start. So I want to be mindful of that kind of thing when I'm doing my designs. But I think it's still good. I like the idea
of like a notification though, like you have going up at the top. I don't think we should always be showing the diffs or things like that. I think letting you know that like there was one description update or 2 or 3 since you last visited, and having a click or 2 deeper to go look at the diff if you want to. Yeah. Versus having it like pile up in the UI. I just think if this is there, I would see this on every single issue every single day I ever looked at it, and then I would get tired. Right. It would, you just ignore it. Yeah. It's almost like there needs to be a threshold. Like, I care about this issue.
That's a good point, actually, because that also raised the question for me of what does the last time you visited mean? Is it the last time you refresh the page? I mean, what if you, like I and a lot of people I think here at GitLab have tons of tabs open that we leave open all the time, and maybe having better collaboration and better connection between these things would reduce that. But if you leave it open all the time, is it a real-time update where people are seeing, you know, as the changes happen, or is it again a reflection of a forced page refresh? I know one of the comments in the SUS information that you shared, Kristen, was that people would like a Google Docs live update kind of approach. And I had heard that feedback actually before in the jobs to be done research that I had done previously, which I thought was kind of interesting. That
that's a ways off. That's a ways off from feasibility standpoint.
Sure.
But I think scrolled into view is, you know, like what I would think, which you can detect pretty much automatically. Like if a certain comment or a description or something scrolls into view or is in view or is active, I think you can all get those off the window, browser window. So
what do you mean scrolled into view? I'm sorry.
So like if something is new to me, it means that I haven't put my eyes on it yet, right?
Okay.
And so usually when you put your eyes on it, it means that you like will scroll to, or like within the view, it will be visible to me, which means that like I've seen it. So it's sort of like what Slack does when you scroll, basically. Like if you scroll to the end, then it treats it as caught up because like I've technically scrolled through the new things and it's treats it as being viewed.
So if you come as a noob, you see everything is new then on your first time.
Seems like that would be the case.
I wonder if there's a way to just highlight it.
Yeah, the inside border of the browser window is called the viewport, and you can detect when something is in the viewport. Is what scrolled into view means. Yeah.
But it seems like we would also want to have a high level way to let them know when they first arrive at the page, if rather than having to scroll down to a portion of the page. It seems like both types of notifications would be valuable. But I also
it could jump like MRs do, like, you know, where you have your open unresolved MRs and it hops you through them. If it could just jump to the changed content also, that would be cool.
Yeah, that was actually kind of what I was thinking too with these arrows. That was something that we had received feedback on when exploring the fixed headers in the past, was that people really love that navigational aspect of MRs, that they can go back and forth in the content, and they wanted something like that in issues too. But inevitably the goal, I think, is to simplify the experience of consuming that information and making it easier to get through, as opposed to having to just scroll and have to figure out where you were if you're coming from something. But that was also what I was kind of playing with here, was that maybe as you scroll, it highlights something new in some way. I'm just kind of demonstrating it with a soft blue background right now. It doesn't necessarily have to be that, but then the gray here is showing this is also something that might be new, but it's not necessarily in your either in your direct view or as you navigate using these arrows. If that was something we wanted to pursue, then in that case, it would highlight as you got to 2 of 2, but then 1 of 2 would kind of fade to a different color or change.
But I think that would work if you allowed, especially in certain places, like to clear all, and then you put that little jumpy thing in the fixed header, sticky header. Because then you can, and I would probably omit most system notes and just focus on comments and discussions.
Yeah.
So that way it's not like too noisy.
And that was another, that was another question that I had kind of asked myself internally, was what kind of comments and what kind of changes again are valuable. Mike, I saw you go off mute. Did you have a comment or a question?
I forgot what it was. It's okay.
Sorry about that. So another approach that I was exploring, again, I really liked Gabe's kind of minimalist design for the detail view, but let me just kind of show how this could potentially work. So going back to, again, starting with to-dos, we've got this sort of minimized view of the Collabject. And when you're in this view, you can potentially click this little arrow or something that takes you to sort of a larger detail view. This is when you have intentionally said, I want to leave the context I'm in and go to a full view of this thing, as opposed to the previous view, of course, where you're kind of getting both. You're staying in your current context and getting a snapshot of what's happening in the Collabject, but not necessarily having to leave your context. So there's value, I think, in offering both. I would also like to explore an even more simplified view of this, where people could clear away the sidebars and the navigation and just have the content to focus on if they choose to, kind of like a full screen view, but I haven't designed that mock yet. Something that I really love that Storybook does, and actually let me stop sharing really quick and just share my whole screen so we can kind of see it. And you all may be familiar with it, but it's this kind of click and drag so that you can really kind of determine how much space you want to allocate to each portion of the page. I love that thought, particularly if it's something that the description is minimal or it's not that important to me, but the comments are very important to me. Maybe I want to expand that space so that I can see more of that information and reduce some of the back and forth that I have to do between those pieces. Again, this is partly coming from the research that we did with Jobs to be Done, where we found, or with Fixed Header, where we found that people typically didn't read the description unless they absolutely had to. They wanted the title, and they wanted the title to be relevant and informative, and then they wanted the comments so that they knew kind of where they needed to jump in and start interacting. So I'd love to maybe offer something like that in this view, where you could kind of click and drag to choose how much space you want to allocate to that piece of the Collabject.
I love, can I,
please,
can I interrupt? I just did interrupt. I love this. Somebody mentioned, Gabe, you mentioned system notes a minute ago. What if there was a tab for discussion and a tab for activity? Which system notes is activity, right?
Yep.
It is. So something else I had explored was having this little, I don't know how well you all can see this, but this little activity thing here, as opposed to the notification bar at the top, having something that kind of just gives you a little notification here that there's something new happening in this particular issue or Collabject. And when you click it, I know it's not necessarily a proposed final design, but just kind of showing that maybe it could provide an overlay of some sort that gives you both the most recent as well as kind of a separate timeline of history, so you can see what's changed most recently and then later. I, again, would love the ability to be able to choose one of these and see something that lets me do something with that piece if I want to, whether it either be navigate to a specific point in a conversation that's just happened, or potentially be able to revert back to a previous decision that might have been made that I can see here if I want to, but that could be MVC, or not MVC, that could be later on. Another approach that I saw to this that I thought was interesting was putting this in a modal, or also even separately going to a tab and having tabs in there. So I mean, I like all of those approaches, honestly, but this sort of icon approach at the top of the notification seemed like a way that it's a pattern that I think people have established for getting notifications, and it's one that we already use at the top as well. So I thought that could be a good way to help let people know that something has changed in this issue, and then also provide access to that activity history.
I've raised my hand if I can go.
Yes, please.
3 points. I like the overview. I like the kind of dual column detail view. Is there an opportunity to make it so that when you do open this up, you don't lose your context? So it's almost like sliding out what was the overview into this more like broader view. So like I could see the preview, I could see this full view, I could close this and still be on my to-dos. That's point one that I would like to see, or like for me personally as a user. The second is the draggable columns width. I use that all the time in Slack for that same reason, where sometimes I want to look in the thread and like pay more attention to that, I will drag and make it bigger. As long as like, and it always snaps back to a default, you know, if I close the sidebar or whatever. That was point 2. And then 3, I like the activity in the dropdown like that, because you could also make it scrollable. Most of that's like noisy, and I don't think people always care. Sometimes they might want to know. So long as we then figure out how to show like toggle or slide through the history of the description change, like near the description, because that's the one system note that you interact with. It's the only system note that you interact with. It would make more sense if it was tied close like that. The ability to switch between the different versions or see them was tied closer to the description. So you don't have to like, you know, navigate through the notes to find the description and then expand to see the diff. You like literally show the diff right in where the description is now.
I like that. Yeah, I agree. I like the lack of having, or the not having to deal with context switching for each of those scenarios.
And I was just going to say the other thing that this sort of UI framework approach gives us is that when we want to layer in other things, like maybe a relationship hierarchy or maybe some of these other things, we can always have the discussion present, but then like have different content that shows up in the left-hand panel, right? Depending on what you're clicking. So if I click on a preview or like a deep link comment somewhere in my discussions, we could show the preview overall and like over the description, or make that more of like a transient area for different content as you interact with different parts of the issue. Just an idea.
What do you mean? Can you maybe say that a different way?
So thinking about that left description panel is a panel for relevant content depending on where you're at in the conversation or what you're trying to do. So the design manager would be a good example, right? Like if you want to reference a design, instead of spinning up and overlaying everything, you could display the design that you reference in a comment in that left-hand panel instead of the description temporarily. Or another issue comment somewhere else that somebody references, or I mean, you could use it for all sorts of different things, or showing the parent-child relationship. But I don't know. I was just thinking about, like, remember that YouTube video they sent you about the scrolly thing, where as you scroll down, it changes the content. Basically, as you interacted with the main content, it would change the content in this like side area to be relevant. That sort of idea is what I was thinking at.
Well, the next thing that I was going to explore, and this may or may not be relevant to that. Go ahead.
Can I make one quick?
Sure.
I don't know if it's too soon for this because it's more like a crit type of level of feedback, so you can just throw it away if you want to. With the law of proximity, you're like thumbs up, thumbs down, the little, I think it's activity feed, the emoji. Those are all, according to law of proximity, they're actually related to the things above them. So my suggestion would be to move them. Can you scroll out again or zoom out? Where you have comments currently, like that's closer to where those types of things would go, below the title.
Yeah, I was going to say below the title is where it would make sense to me. Because
in terms of like the vertical space, right? Below the vertical space of the title, so that people know, oh, these are controls for the issue. Because right now it's too close to the nav bar. That's my just want to get that out there.
I know that's a very good point. Honestly, this was me kind of pulling that information over when it was in this sort of sidebar piece. And then I just kind of left it there as I started exploring other things. And I thought I'll come back to this. I do like the thought of it being here just for simplicity, but I see what you're saying. Absolutely. That from a contextual perspective, people may not realize that those things, first of all, they may not notice them potentially. If they've got a giant monitor, it might be way off to the side, but then separately also, they may not as easily make the connection that those things are associated with this issue unless they were closer visually. So that's a great point.
Another idea too is just decoupling the title. So over on the left, like you've got the bar going all the way across. And then once it starts scrolling, those two would have to break. So I think it makes sense that it would go below comments, and then the title could stay fixed on the left too, regardless of your scrolling for the comment.
Are we saying that these items on the right would go under the title or on the right?
On the right under comments
Under
4,
comments.
I think was Mike's suggestion. And I'm just saying
I
that,
don't
well,
wanna
maybe
get
you would
too-
keep the bar, but
I don't want to be too
Yeah.
prescriptive about where to put them. I
Sure.
should probably just should have kept it simple.
they're close.
They're too close to the other icons.
Yeah,
And so we
that's
need
fair,
to
too.
make it really obvious that they're related to this issue.
Cool.
And I'll just
That's-
put a period at the end of that sentence. Where you
That's
put
great
it next is up to you.
I appreciate
was
it.
also going to say it's worth looking at what the Create Editor team is doing, because they're revamping the entire navigation, top and side. So
Yeah, I think I have seen some of the discussion surrounding that, but I'll check with them as well. The other thing that I was looking to maybe explore next was kind of the same type of fun. And there's absolutely nothing here, obviously, right now, but how to show the relationships between the issues. And this is a question that I have for the PMs actually. What kind of information do you need to be able to see when it comes to relationships between things? Like, we know related, blocked, and blocking, but what else?
I think like some of it would be a click below like this, but it's parenting lineage, like it's breadcrumb or something. I think that needs to be visible.
Okay.
And if it's related or blocked, there needs to be some indicator that that's on as well. So I don't have to like mystery meat click on linked every time to see. So either like a count or something that would show the number. I do like having them there available so that it's like a easy tab switch without losing context.
What kind of related information is valuable?
Status.
If that makes status.
And
can you expand?
Yeah, so I use it all the time when I'm looking at issues. So when I look at related merge requests, I look to see if the merge request is open, closed, or merged. I look at the milestone and I see who's assigned. So I know who's working on it, when it's going to be worked on, or when it is planned for, and then if it's open still or has been merged, right? But one of the things that we don't do well now is like, I don't need to see all of them. I just want to see the most like relevant ones, because sometimes if there's 15 link merge requests, I don't care about the things that have been closed like 6 months ago. I care about the thing that is like in this current milestone or that the team is working on now, right? And the status of that thing. Same thing with issues and epics and stuff like that.
I almost wonder if MR should get its own tab and it could have a status like 3 of 10 merged, which would be useful because you kind of quickly see where only 3 of them are merged. And then linked objects, that has to be extensible because we'll have multiple types of issues. We'll have potentially like linked epics, initiatives, other issue types. And so that tab, I think, would be more, yeah, it has to scale essentially with the different object types.
I would
MRs would just stay.
Yeah, I would table this because we have a whole cycle, 2-week cycle where we're focusing just on relationships. So we could table it till then if you wanted, but.
I do, because I think there's a lot of opportunity there. This is great feedback though, and I appreciate it because I do want to be thinking about it, but I really liked what that Obsidian app does that I think I've showed a couple of you that Mike had introduced to me. Mike Nichols, by the way. I had created this, just to clarify, I had created this, oh, come on, it's not wanting to drag over for some reason. Zoom is in the way, there we go. So I had created just some test things, but what I like about it is 2 pieces. And this is more for Kristen, I think, because I don't think I've shown her, but you can put in a tag for something, and then it will show up over here when you search as well as anything else. So this is just kind of a way to connect those pieces, but then I can also do this, you know, some way to make it like actually I need to do this, sorry, not mention me. I need to actually reference the title of one of those. Testing, and it will provide like links to other things. So in this case, it would be the same as either addressing a keyword that I could then make searchable through a filtered list over here that shows me not only the word that I've searched for, but a bit of the context around it, which is really helpful. So it's not just showing me the word itself. In this case, it is because I've only got one thing here. But if I add in additional stuff, it shows me a bit of the context associated with the word, which is helpful if you're looking for something that is like a yes, go with this icon, or no, don't go with this icon. And it turns out all you're searching for is icon. It helps you to quickly be able to filter everything and see the context related to that particular word, which is nice. Mm-hmm. And then over here, it is linked and unlinked mentions, which is essentially the same as mentioning an issue or a person or anything else in one place related to that particular issue, if we think about it from our perspective. So you could have a little panel that shows you in one place everything that was, you know, a mention of sorts in one location, mm-hmm. without having to scroll through all of the content to find that. And that's also feedback that we had gotten in the jobs to be done, was that, or in some of the research we've done in the past, that people wanted a separate section just dedicated to links and kind of external pieces that are referenced in that description or in that collaboration, even not just in the description, but anywhere in the issue. So that's something else I'd like to explore. Yes, please.
Yeah, I haven't seen Obsidian, but we did a lot of deep dives into Rome research, which is a lot like this. It's a competitive wiki. So I used to own wikis. So I think that that this type of markdown could be really useful in GitLab for how we do our GitLab flavored markdown and being able to attach specific, especially mentions onto markup. But I do think the current wiki team is evaluating more from the UI experiences, with code blocks dropping in more like Notion does versus like editing the markdown itself. So I totally on board that I think that this could work, but once we have those individual blocks or areas, you could do more in terms of like, maybe we're commenting on this particular paragraph or this particular word.
Well, you click on the little relationship bubbles. That's the thing that I'm interested in exploring, like a left-hand nav of this.
Over here?
Yeah, all the way to the left. It's the diagram, graph view. That's it.
So this was interesting too, and I have to give Mike Nichols credit
Rome
for this
too.
Yeah, they're
I feel like this
is
like Rome ripoff.
Well, they are listed as a big competitor of this product, or maybe this product is a competitor of them. But something that I thought Mike had said that was really interesting was, we were talking about the relationships, and I said, well, there's got to be a way to visualize these relationships. And I said, I want to be able to incorporate something like that into our product. And he goes, no, you don't want to do that, because this is what you get. Now, this is simple, obviously. We only have 3 points here, but if you have 40 points, is that meaningful at that point? It just feels like a big starburst of data. Is that relevant? And that's actually a question that I'm proposing to you all, because it made sense to me when he said it, that it sounds good, but is it really useful?
I think there's an example of how crazy it can get. If you can click on the node to see more details about it, it gets more useful, I think, without having to like navigate away, like almost like a preview. But again, I would table this for where we talk about related linked items, because there's also some interesting ideas from some other folks in the company who commented on that and shared some things too. But
cool.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're at time, but those are some of the things that I had been playing around with and exploring. And Kristen, I'm so sorry. You had asked yesterday about a link, and I just realized I didn't share that with you. So I'll post that in the agenda now for this. Is there anything else? Like, I think Gabe and I had talked the other day about continuing to explore these topics a bit more for this iteration, as opposed to moving on to the next phase. And I just mentioned that to make sure that everybody's on the same page about that, or if there are any concerns with that.
I don't think we'd move on until, I don't think we'd move on until we've converged on a solution that we'd want input from engineering on. So if you think, if we're kind of gelling and solidifying around some concepts, we'd want to let at least Jonald know as soon as possible. Donald and John.
Yeah, I think we need to shore up too on our expectations and like how much we're contributing to building a new UI in this next push and merging epics over.
I think that's the thing though, is like, in order to merge epics over, we have to rewrite the issue view. Right. So
or under the hood, yeah, like under the hood, it is changed, but the initial rollout, all the views are untouched as an MVC.
I don't think we can do
and
that.
And then we add an upgraded.
If we can technically, then I'm fine approaching that. But the way that they told me is that they're going to have to invest the time to rewrite it all anyways, which if we don't like have design input, then they're going to have to do it again. So it's like double the work. So whatever they say, like I follow their guidance, but that's why I was pushing to like do whatever UI change we want now. So because it's going to be the same amount of work whether we do the UI changes or not, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think to a point, I agree, but moving, like doing massive changes is like going to add a lot more work around the actual CSS and like how everything's laid out.
Yeah, but I guess like it's not just the CSS, none of the front end code, like the Vue stuff is, or I would say 90% of it is not using Vue the way that we write Vue now, which is why it has to be rewritten. So even if we like take a very iterative approach towards working towards whatever the outcome is here, like we can leave that up to the engineers to like gauge. I just like what's basically happened with issue boards now, we spent 9 months refactoring them, and I just learned that we have to refactor them again to make them real time, which is exactly like the concern I raised at the first time. So like now we're a good 6 to 9 months away from being able to make boards real time, even though the backend is technically ready at this point. So I want to avoid that. I don't care what we do as long as we avoid that.
I put a question just for everyone to kind of think on, that it would be helpful for me to see if there's anything that we have identified as this is definitely something that we want to strive for MVC. And I would love for Alexis to have a chance to kind of talk through hers too, because I want to make sure that everything is being reviewed. But is there anything that we want to keep? Is there anything that we want to discard of what we've seen so far? Like I got rid of the issue type switcher because that just didn't seem like something that was part of what we wanted to explore for this. And then also definitely not an MVC. So it would be helpful for me so that I don't just keep on going all over the place, to have it kind of honed in on what we might want to dig deeper into versus what we're done with and we don't want to explore for this. And you don't have to answer it, but that would just be helpful to help me stay on track.
Yeah, I think anything switching makes sense to leave behind for right now, because we can use the current, we're only going to have one view initially that's loaded. Right. So like add epic buttons and add issue buttons still will exist.
Okay.
When we go live.
Good to know. So just something to kind of think about, and that's all that I had for today.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.